the last thing the world needs is another bass book, because first of all, there's so many of them out there already, just kind of gathering dust on shelves. And also the ones that are out there are by these iconic people. So, Ray Brown has a bass book, and Ziggy Bush has a bass book, and Todd Kuhlman and John Goldsby and Ron Carter and all this, Mark Johnson. And I'm like, if I did write a book, why in the world would anybody buy it?
I have been totally fascinated by what Chris Fitzgerald is up to with his YouTube channel. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we are chatting with University of Louisville bass professor Chris Fitzgerald today. And Chris has been making a tremendous impact in the jazz bass world with his Bass Technique series videos. He's got these fantastic hour-and-a-half videos covering right-hand pizzicato technique, bass posture, thumb position technique, and so many other topics. Chris and I talk about how he got into this, why he decided to do this instead of a jazz method book. Very interesting. Why he decided that the last thing the world needs is a jazz bass method book from him, and much more. A lot of these videos were filmed at the Jamey Aebersold camp in the summer, and they have folks like Rufus Reid, Lynn Seaton, John Goldsby, and so many other people. We've got some great sponsors for this episode: D'Addario Strings, Upton Bass, and the Bass Violin Shop. And we are featuring tracks from Chris's album, Sparrow and the Bear, which features Chris along with David Klingman. I'd love to know, when did this whole idea, because it's really incredible what you've built with this YouTube channel, in addition to, obviously you're doing lots of things in the music world, but when did that idea to do what you're doing with this channel, what was the genesis of that idea for you?
Well, the genesis of it was, so I've been at the University of Louisville since about 2000, actually a few years before, but I was, I was made tenure track in 2012, but I was sort of full-time from about 2000 on. And so when I was made tenure track, there's this whole publish or perish thing that comes with that, as I'm sure you know. And so the position was not very defined because I also teach theory, traditional theory and jazz improvisation and jazz bass, and I was teaching jazz piano, and I was sort of like a utility infielder. And so I went to the dean and I said, obviously I'm listed as performance faculty and I perform a lot, but what else should I be doing? Because in terms of publishing and recording and all of this kind of thing. And he, at first he didn't give me a lot of guidance. It was sort of like, well, all the stuff you do is great, so just keep doing what you're doing. And, he said, if you publish, you might think about doing a book. And honestly, my heart just kind of sank, because I thought the last thing the world needs is another bass book, because first of all, there's so many of them out there already, just kind of gathering dust on shelves. And also the ones that are out there are by these iconic people. So, Ray Brown has a bass book, and Ziggy Bush has a bass book, and Todd Kuhlman and John Goldsby and Ron Carter and all this, Mark Johnson. And I'm like, if I did write a book, why in the world would anybody buy it? Because, it's like, oh, you got, Ray Brown's book or this guy from Louisville who I've never heard. And so I started watching my son and my students. And I looked in the first place that they went for any knowledge, aside from Wikipedia, of course, was YouTube. So, it's like my son would be into whatever his latest obsession was, and he would be hooked into YouTube all the time to learn how to do this thing. That was part of it. Part of it was I've been an administrator and moderator on TalkBass for a long time. And when I first joined that back in 2000, there were some people who were very instrumental in helping me out before the internet was really huge, And at that time, everybody was on dial-up. And so there were a couple of people, Paul Warburton from Denver, who, played with Bill Evans in the year I was born with the Bill Evans Trio. In the year I was born, 1964. A couple of guys from New York. And so we started talking on there, and these guys were great because they said, you really sound like you're talking some interesting stuff. Send me some of your recordings. Let me send you some of mine, and let's exchange ideas. And these people just gave of their time and their knowledge, and most of them were older than me. And they would say, hey, send me some recordings of you playing. And I would send them, and they would make these really salient comments, that were not, it wasn't just ego, like, hey kid, if you do this, you'll be more like me and you'll be cool. It was really, really thoughtful stuff. Paul Warburton in specific, he heard something in my playing that reminded him of Red Mitchell. He sent me all this Red Mitchell stuff. He said, you've got so much Red Mitchell in you. You got to really explore this. So I think a part of it was video is the way to go, because kids are doing video now. Video it offers so much more. It's one thing to read something. Back in my day when I started, you would get a book and there'd be a CD with it, and you're supposed to put the book out and then play track 23B of the CD. And it's like, kids aren't going to do that. People are not going to do that now. And so the idea of being able to put an idea out there, play the example, show what you're doing, let them hear it, let them see it, and then be able to put all these, in some of the videos, I'm able to put like music notation at the bottom, me playing on the side, text in the middle, multi-track with piano sometimes. And the viewers, it started off just a real simple thing. Here are the topics I teach in my studio. Let me do those first so that my students could benefit from this, so I don't have to keep teaching the same lesson over and over and over. I can say, hey, between now and next week, instead of us wasting an hour talking about this, watch the video, come in and let's explore that topic. And so all the stuff that's on my syllabus, the right-hand technique, the left-hand technique, the double stops, the walking lines, all this stuff, I thought, well, this is going to, on one hand, it's going to serve the students that I already have. On another hand, it's going to serve all these students or these people who are interested in the bass that I may never meet, but who, one of the amazing things about it was when I first started doing it, I would get these emails from places like, South America, or places I had to look up on a globe, saying, thank you so much for doing this, because there's no bass teachers around where I am. And, this is really helping me out a lot. And that was really kind of inspiring. And it kind of felt like giving back to these guys who gave to me, by just being on the internet and, saying, hey, try this. And I found that this is a really good idea. So it was that. And then the idea of, if you're teaching at a college now, you can only do so much recruiting in person, like going out to places and meeting people. But if you put these videos out and if people think they're good, then someone may say, I like the way this guy teaches. I like the way this guy plays. Maybe I should think about looking at that school, because this is who I'd be spending time with.
Next up, we dig into why YouTube, why this channel works for what Chris is up to. Totally fascinating. And I would like to give a shout out to our sponsor, D'Addario Strings, and bring you this clip with orchestral product manager Lyris Hung about how to take care of your strings.
People often ask me, I don't want to spend a lot of money. What can I do? And I mean, my answer is simple. And that's just to clean your strings, to keep your strings really clean. And a lot of people, they clean their strings. Most people will clean their strings, but not often enough. When we touch our strings and we have our skin against the strings, we have body oils and moisture, sweat, whatever sort of things are on our fingers at that moment, touching the strings and getting stuck on the strings, and often getting stuck inside the winding. And we don't really, theoretically, most people know that this is happening, but we don't really know how detrimental that is to the string, because it's so hard to see. So what's happening is, if you're sweating just a little bit, that sweat will go inside the windings, because it's a liquid, and the windings they're not hermetically sealing the string. They're just there, and there's little gaps that you can kind of get into. And that moisture goes in, and especially if you're using metal core strings, so most bass players are using some sort of a steel core at some point in their life, and that steel core is highly susceptible to corrosion. So unfortunately, that can kind of eat away quicker than we'd like, and kind of create corrosive elements in there. So you either start breaking the string, or you have what's called artificial damping that's happening, because the stuff that's cruding up inside is creating more damping, but unevenly. So it's not helping you out. It's basically, making your string less and less uniform.
Thanks for the great tips, Lyris. And folks, check out more about D'Addario and what they have to offer. And I am using D'Addario strings on my bass, my Kaplan strings. I love them. Check them out at contrabassconversations.com/strings. Thank you also to the Bass Violin Shop, which offers rentals for bassists. If you are coming to the United States, and especially the southeastern United States, where the Bass Violin Shop is located, you can get a rental bass. If you're a seasoned musician, if you're a first-timer, whatever, they've got long and short-term rental programs for every bass player's needs. So if you're touring with your group in the Carolinas, or you're attending a festival or workshop, and you need a bass, get in touch with them, bassviolinshop.com. That publish or perish thing, right? Like what a valuable way to publish. You got them all time stamped, so you can jump between the topics. It's a brilliant way to lay out this material.
Yeah, let me speak to the length of it. Thank you, by the way. It's been a crazy ride, because when it started, when you first start on YouTube, you have a 15-minute time limit. And so the first couple were, 12 minutes. The second was like 14:58. It's like, okay, let me get it in. But then apparently when you get a certain number of views, they increase it. So it's like you pass through the first flaming hoop, and they're like, you can make a longer one. But the longer ones was real important to me, because when I looked around, this was kind of what my ISB presentation was about. When I was looking around, you try to find your niche. So I see a lot of YouTube videos, and I saw some, John Goldsman, I've talked about that a lot. There's a lot of really not so great ones out there. Of course, I won't mention any names, but I mean, you look out there and it's like, yeah, this is not really happening. And so part of it was, if this is getting views and this is popular, it's like maybe I can do something a little more valuable, a little more thorough than that. But mostly what I saw was people at that time, views themselves were the defining characteristic, the most views that you get. So people were putting out like tons and tons of super short videos. But the longer videos, I do not expect anyone to sit and watch a whole thing. I mean, they're so long, it's like a feature length thing. But the longer videos are about, and the time stamping it was the idea behind that was putting a big topic in context, so that someone could watch 5 minutes of it and say, okay, I'm going to digest this, and then here's where I left off, and here's what comes next, so that you wouldn't have to say, okay, where's the next video that comes after this? So it's actually, a contextual thing, like a book. I think that probably turns some people off, because they look at it and they're like, Jesus, it's like an hour and 10 minutes. I'm not watching that. But you don't have to watch the whole thing. You can just say, well, let me see what Rufus Reed has to say on this video, and that can blow everybody else off. And then they get kind of caught up, and they see, oh, this guy's got something nice to say too.
I got completely caught up myself. I going through the right hand pizzicato technique video. My intention was like, I'm just going to watch a little bit of this, and I started, like you were saying, I was clicking around. I'll tell you, I watched the whole thing. I watched I got sucked in, and I was just like, what's Lynne gonna say about technique? And Rich Armandi you've got on there. He's an old buddy of mine from Chicago, so it's really compelling watching, not in the same way that like little cat videos are, but it is like an incredibly valuable. And I'm so glad that you've laid it out this way, so that you can flip back and forth between like seeing like, how does Rufus articulate? How does John Goldsby? It's really amazing.
And the thing I think that I was very fortunate with this was the dean of the school and my department chair, I guess they call it concentration coordinator now. I don't know. The head of jazz studies, Mike Tracy. When I mentioned this idea to them, they were both very open to it, because I think their thinking was, it's probably enough if you just perform, but why not do this too? It's might be a good thing. You know, I don't think they had any idea it would turn into what it turned into, but you know, a lot of academics would have said, well, it has to be peer reviewed and it's got to go through all these hoops and blah, blah, blah. But they were both very forward thinking and saying, you know, how about you don't ask me whether you should do this? How about you do it and show me how cool it could be? And then we'll talk. And then as soon as, you know, it started getting some responses and they saw what it was about, they said, yeah, this is great, you know, and actually I go up for tenure this year and it's a big part of the portfolio. And who knows how higher administration is going to say it, you know, it might be like, YouTube's not peer reviewed, but I think with the feedback that it's gotten and the, you know, I think it will be, you know, my impression is that it's going to be viewed very positively.
Oh yeah. I mean, how many academic projects, which is so cool that this is like, you know, at its heart, an academic project, but how many of them languish in obscurity, right? It's a big project. Even putting one of these videos together, let alone all of these.
I mean, the rule that I basically have come up with, and I have to tell my wife this when I start one of them, is that for every minute of video, there's like 2 hours of preparation and production and you know, so if it's like a 60-minute video, it's 120 hours of work, and it's not all done at one time. I mean, it's done sort of piecemeal, but you know, you put them out when you can. I mean, the teaching schedule's really busy, and you know what academic teaching schedules are like, you know, you're busy all the time, but you get into it. It's like getting into a recording project, and you get sucked into the project and it starts to take shape on its own. You know, I don't script them that heavily. It's just, I'm going to explore this topic and I'll shoot a scene. And then I'll say, you know what, that means that we really got to go here next and talk about this. So it sort of evolves like an improvised performance. And sometimes you throw a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor because you're like, yeah, that was too wordy. I'm too wordy anyway, but you know, even for me, that was too wordy. I got to do that more succinctly.
You know, you're bound to learn a lot about video production when you spend all this time putting something together on YouTube. I've learned so much in terms of podcasting and that kind of thing through putting out all this content, and Chris has learned a lot too, so we dig into that. But first, I would like to share this great story about Upton Bass, one of our sponsors, and this story comes from Broadway musician and touring artist David White.
I have to mention Upton Bass in Connecticut because those guys have really bailed me out, and Eric specifically has become a good friend. He's a very, very nice guy. The story of my upright is my grandmother, who I was very close with, passed away before my senior year of high school. And she was always a very big supporter of me playing, and she always came to every concert, was the loudest cheerleader. Anyway, when she passed away, she was kind enough to leave money for me to be able to purchase a professional instrument. And for a long time, I had been looking around trying to find some stuff. And I said, you know, I really like these vintage instruments, but, you know, I didn't want to spend 30, 40 grand on something that I just kind of liked. So just kind of searching, I stumbled upon Upton, and I said, you know what, I think I want to get a new instrument built, something to my specifications. And it was also an intensely personal process for me because of the history with my grandmother. Anyway, I went to them, and they bent over backwards to make this beautiful 7/8 bass. And I had gotten it, and I was playing a tour of Guys and Dolls, and I set it on a chair, and my foot got caught in a cable, and down she went, and I cracked off the entire scroll. Now, the funny thing was I happened to be in New London, Connecticut, which is about 6 miles down the road from their shop. So Dave, who runs their website, ran over, gave me a rental bass, took my damaged bass, went away with it, and fixed it up.
Learn more about what the great folks at Upton are up to at uptonbass.com. And thanks for sponsoring Contrabass Conversations, guys. All right, back to our conversation with Chris Fitzgerald.
What have you learned in this whole journey, just either in terms of like planning or video editing, or I'm sure you've learned a lot?
You know, I've learned to take each subject as its own thing and just let it be what it needs to be. Because the nice thing about it is, and maybe this is the nice thing about that it doesn't have to be peer reviewed, is I don't have to research what a bunch of other people say is correct and what is accepted. I can talk about what I do and what I believe and what works for me, but I also try to be very careful to say, this is my take on it. If it's useful to you, use it. If it's not useful to you, then, if it doesn't work for you, then don't use it. I mean, this isn't supposed to be like the way. This is the way that I do it, and it's just one way. I think if I had one defining thing, and I was telling the guys on the right hand, actually this is the right hand articulation video and the posture video that was last year with all the camp guys. I said, my goal with this is to be the only bit of dogma that I want to put out is that dogma is bad. So I'm like the anti-dogma dogmatist. And the whole point of getting all of these other players to do it is because I don't know if it's something that happened in my own head, but a lot of times I would get the idea that, there's this one way to do it. And if you're not doing it that way, you're doing it wrong. And I hope nobody notices that I'm doing it wrong. And I'm using like an illegal fingering here. And my hand shape is not correct. And I just would freak out about this for a long time. It'd just be like, oh, maybe I should be playing with my fingers shaped this way. But what I realized through teaching, I'm like 6'1" and all long arms and legs. And I have students who are 5'0" nothing, and they can't do what I do. It's a different geometry, and I have students who are double jointed, and they can't do things the way that I do them. And so I'd be a real jerk if I said, no, it has to be like this, even though, I'm 14 inches taller than you and not double jointed. That would be ridiculous. And so I think that there are some principles that you can put out there, I think, that are good, that are, I won't say universal, but more or less universal. Being efficient with your energy and, not wasting your energy and not doing things that'll damage your body. But there's so many different ways to do something, and you see so many people doing things so many different ways and being successful at it. And I think that's a good message to get out there.
Chris, so great to chat with you. Folks, check him out online at chrisfitzgeraldmusic.com. And I just love what Chris is up to. This YouTube channel, this is the perfect example of using this modern technology to better double bass, to better education, jazz education, and better the world. I mean, really, that sounds cheesy, but it's true. I love what Chris is up to, and it's so cool to see people like Rufus Reid and Lynn Seaton and John Goldsby, all these great artists and past podcast guests, by the way, showing how they teach these different techniques. And it shows me the diversity and range of approaches to this instrument that are out there. So thank you, Chris, for what you do, and thank you for listening. Whether this is your first episode or your 406th episode, I can't believe we're up to 406 episodes. Thank you for tuning in. It means so much to me, and it would mean so much to me if you would share this out. Share this with a friend. Share this with a student. Share this with a colleague. It does not have to be a bass player. Obviously, these shows are not, they're about bass, of course, but not exclusively. Maybe sometimes only like 25% bass related, right? So share this out. It would mean so much to me. I'm sure Chris would appreciate it too. And I am so grateful to be on this journey and have you on this journey with me. We've got so much more good content coming up. ContrabassConversations.com is the website where you can learn all about what we're up to. We're always adding new stuff each and every week. And you can email me, get in touch, feedback@ContrabassConversations.com. I would love to hear from you, get an idea for a show, whether it's a guest or a topic or something like that. That would be great. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.